What if you got a check from the government every month, regardless of financial situation? A set amount of money given without requirements or stigma from the government or them telling you how to spend it. This is essentially a UBI, a universal basic income. A UBI would replace a bloated and convoluted social welfare structure, provide a cushion for those who are displaced due to automation, and promote economic growth in rural and urban America. A UBI would replace most of, if not all, of the 96 different social welfare programs that are ran by the federal government, many of which have various gatekeepers and bureaucratic loopholes they want their recipients to jump through, or some to even remain on the program. Disability is famous for this. It often wants to try and catch people who wants to see people get better, even though usually they don't, because it's usually back problems or knee problems. They don't get better. And many of them have binary conditions and sharp cutoffs for people that basically just serve to trap them. Like, you can't get a better job, or you can't improve your lot in life, or else you'll lose way more than whatever minor raise or minor job you would have gotten. And it does kind of abruptly and arbitrarily cut people off from the programs that they unfortunately kind of rely on. And it's always in my personal experience, it was always just comically small amounts of money that my family would lose. Like WIC, for example. Like, I made $5 too much to get WIC, and that it was ridiculous for me. It was frustrating, because especially being 20-something, trying my best, and $5 was not enough to pay for the baby formula, and that's basically what it came down to, because that's all we really needed it for, because baby formula is like $40 a can, and it lasts a week maybe, and when you're making minimum wage, it's pretty rough. But that's just one of the examples that I have of, like, a lot of times you just have these you make too much, and you don't have enough money from what you made to pay for the things, or you have to start like cutting out food, or like finding different ways to cut. It's just a not very efficient system if your goal is to help people better themselves. And welfare is kind of in this boat as well. Only its recipients can contribute to the economy, but they really can't, because they'll be cut off and lose their benefits. And even if they would leave, they often don't have the skills or job experience that will earn them enough to replace what they've lost. Like, even though welfare makes them go and do all these job applications, it doesn't actually benefit them, because if they had the job, they would lose way more than what they had. So, I mean, even something that maybe not a full UBI, but at least something to comp them, that would be a much better system than what we have now. And the welfare ultimately is just a trap for people in poverty that they realistically can't escape, short of winning the lottery, which is another presentation. We're not going to get into that. And it forces a kind of mental and emotional dependency on these programs. Even though it's a kind of an abusive situation, abusive relationship, it does form that. And I personally, and I'm sure some of you at home have known family members or friends of family members who's really good at working the system. That's one of their few job skills, actually, is knowing what to say, how to say it, and what papers to fill out, what time. And that's not what you should be. The people on these programs and the programs themselves should encourage them to actually better themselves and not just patronize them. But again, this behavior is a natural consequence of a system that's designed to make life as hard as possible on its recipients. And the UBI would provide a way for people on welfare to rejoin the economy without worrying about losing their benefits or them being pulled out from underneath them. or being accused of fraud. It would also freeze recipients from the psychological torture and undue stress that welfare creates. And that is something that pretty much, unless you've seen it firsthand or had it happen to you firsthand, you don't quite understand. And I'm happy for you if you've never seen it, but just take some people's words. It's not great. And then moving on, like food stamps and HUD, it would be probably better to have a UBI replace these, because it would allow people to choose the food that they want to make, not make, but buy, and the disadvantages to these, they are good programs, don't get me wrong, and the problem I have with them is that they go down as a person makes more, which basically just encourages the person to make the same. It doesn't, if you make get a raise or turn down or make I apologize, get more hours at work or something like that, or get a promotion, you'll lose that amount or more possibly on food stamps or HUD, which is used for like heating and stuff like that. So, and if you're unlucky enough that raise pushes you into a new tax bracket, you now make less than you did before your raise, which is kind of crazy. So the UBI, a raise would be just that, would be a raise, or a new job would be a new job. You wouldn't have to make those weird calculations of like, I could take this job, but I'll lose this, and it would just make life simpler for poor people to just do better. And that's really what the nuts and bolts of it is. A UBI makes life way less complicated for being poor. And speaking of it, this is just bad. And if we just move into automation, it's set to replace, this will eliminate 70 million jobs by 2035. It's just manufacturing jobs. It was, and it's actually, it's actually slated to replace all human tasks by 2050. I still think there will be jobs, just not a whole lot of them. And we've seen something like this in the 80s and 90s, where whole factors of industry and production were outsourced. I mean, many places, you can look at Detroit and Baltimore and Cleveland. They were booming in the 50s and 60s, and now everyone knows about Detroit. And most of the American Midwest as well, West Virginia, Ohio, parts of like Tennessee, Missouri, like all the Rust Belt. They've never recovered from this because their whole lives are based on these factors. And now we're about to see the same thing, only in white collar jobs. Because you have to look at AI. It's no longer about robot arms, because they will replace human workers. But just like market analysts, AI does it better. Accounting, AI can do that. Like HR reps, you don't need HR if you don't have people. Like, it's really what it boils down to. And marketing, we've all seen how effective like Facebook and YouTube marketing can be. You don't really need people to do that anymore. You maybe like a team to create it, but to like pinpoint, an algorithm will do that. And again, we're looking at I think like 700 million jobs being gone by 2050. That's an absurd number. That's too many. We have to think proactively on how we're going to deal with this problem, not just we'll teach truck drivers how to program. Like that's a lazy excuse. That's not going to. It might work for some, but it's not going to work for everyone. It won't solve the problem, but it will prevent rioting in the streets when no one has any money for food. And speaking of food, in the United States, there are a lot of areas they're called food deserts, but they cannot economically support like grocery stores. So all they have to go on is just convenience food and stuff like that. And a lot of this is because it's either food stamps or they just don't make it. It's just impoverished. They don't make enough to actually support a grocery store, or to warrant there being a grocery store, which is a sad fact of life. And this is both in really poor parts of like New York and urban America as well. Like it affects both black and white communities. And this would help a lot. A UBI would help this a lot because it would basically, instead of everyone getting these like strict um, food stamps or whatnot that you can only spend in certain times in certain ways, UBI just gives you the money. So then you can, businesses or people who even work there would have incentives to go to these areas knowing that their clients actually have actual money to spend on what they want. And that would probably open up different parts of the economy that we're not seeing. And again, this is the kind of comes from me growing up poor, but um, a lot of the local communities, they have, I don't, haggling, hustle. It's just like tick for tack, where like, I'll change your brakes if you give me the rest of your food stamps. And it's like a $50 to $100 worth or something like that. Or I've seen like braiding hair for like the milk off your wick or what have you. This is fraud, like that's a felony. But in the UBI, that's just a normal check. So close. Under UBI, if you're just getting cash, these would just be the cash transfers. It'd just be part of the economy. So I would, yeah, like in conclusion, a UBI would be a much more efficient and liberating system than our current welfare programs. And I hope I'm giving you some food for thought. And I hope that you can ponder on what you would do with an extra $1,000 a month from the government. And thank you.